What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're here with some early PGA DFS picks and line advice. This time recording on Tuesday for a major, the U.S. Open at LACC. DraftKings, FanDuel, line of advice, bets, sleepers, everything you need to crush this PGA slate. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder at Occupy Fantasy, and I'm joined once again. I am honored to be joined by our PGA DFS writer at Occupy Fantasy, Niromada. Niro, what's up, man? Thanks for taking the time out of your also busy week to join me.
And no problem. Honored to, I like it. I don't get many of those where people are honored to have me join any types of calls or conversations. So I'm down with that. Let's do that.
Well, I will. I think everyone appreciates your time, so it will always be an honor for you to be on these shows. So, for those of you who are watching who are new here, what we're going to do, we're going to break down the course, talk about the weather, analyze the betting markets, and then give some picks. Talk about who we expect to be the highest owned golfers of the week, and then give some of our favorite lower owned golfers that can help you win potentially that $1 million prize over on DraftKings. Now, again, we are recording this on Tuesday, so we don't have the full betting market information at our fingertips. We'll get more into that later. So instead, let's start with this course. And Nero, I say this with pure affection. Every golf nerd is loving Los Angeles Country Club for a major. And they are all about this course, potentially the best course we could have for a major in decades, some people are saying. Is that hyperbole, first and foremost? And then secondly, what is it about this course that makes it so special? And what is it going to be like for golfers playing this major?
Yeah, so the first question of whether or not it's hyperbole, I think really depends on how into golf architecture you are. So for 99% plus probably of the people watching this show, they're not that into it. So, you'll see a nicely presented golf course and you'll see some unique characteristics, but it probably won't be that big of a deal for most people. The golf architecture folks and the golf course analysts love this one because it's non-traditional for a U.S. Open venue, which historically U.S. Open venues are super long, lush, a lot of rough. We saw it at the PGA. Actually, the PGA a month ago was set up basically like a U.S. Open. You drive it 2 yards off the fairway and you're in like 4-inch rough. It's basically a half a stroke penalty. But if you blow it 20 yards off the fairway, you're actually in the trampled down rough where everyone is standing and walking and stuff, and you have almost like a better shot to get to the green with that kind. So those folks don't love like the unfairness piece of that. LA Country Club is long. It's 7,400 yards, par 70, but it's very firm and fast. So there will be plenty of rollout. Other types of players will be able to compete here. You will not just have to bomb. I mean, distance is always advantageous, and distance will be advantageous this week, 100%. But in a lot of the most recent U.S. Opens, distance has kind of been like the end all be all, and that is absolutely not the case this week. Fairways are really, not all of them, but most of them are really wide. The difference is a lot of them are angled in a way so like it might be angled right to left. So you have to hit a ball that moves left to right to hit into the slope to stay on the fairway. If you hit a ball that goes right to left and hits off the downward part of the slope, it's going to run into the rough. Now the rough it's Bermuda rough. It's not super high next to the fairways, so driving accuracy you would think is not that important, but the course is very much an old school design where it's all about angles. So you could be on the left side of the fairway on a particular hole and just have an awful shot to the green. Like, no angle. You have to go over two bunkers to get to the pin. It's tucked in a small spot. You just have no chance, basically. It would be similar to if you were in the rough and like behind a tree or something, but in this case, you're sitting in the fairway.
Gotcha.
And if you're on the right side of the fairway, you have a great angle of attack and you have a great shot into the green and that whole thing. So the accuracy piece off the tee matters. It just doesn't matter as much because in those courses where there's tons of rough next to the fairway, everyone misses the fairway. And the high swing speed guys are the only guys that can get through that rough. And that will not be the case this week. The lower swing speed guys will be able to approach the green. Now, up by the green, there's a combination of like shaved, like closely mown areas, and some really tall, high, like fescue almost type grass and rough U.S. Open style, and steep bunkers on a lot of holes. So most of the greens are slanted from back to front, and they kind of have narrow openings up the front, bunker surrounds, deep rough interspersed with these runoff areas. So you might get stuck in the fescue grass, or you might roll short and then you roll 30 yards down a slope, and then you got to pitch it back up that same slope again. Then you might get stuck in the fescue grass behind the green if you went too long, and now you're trying to hit it out of the fescue grass and not have it roll back down the front part of the slope. So I think it's going to be, I think it's going to reward more of the short game creative types than a usual U.S. Open would reward.
So obviously, the first couple of names that come to mind when we hear short game, we hear creative. Jordan Spieth, Cameron
Yep.
Smith.
Yep.
How do you feel about those types of guys? And are there any other names that maybe the casual fan may, and I'm pointing at myself as well, may be missing when it comes to these creative types?
Were you are you on my computer watching me write the plug, because you might have seen some of those same names on there. But yeah, like like a Patrick Reed, someone like that. Guys who play well at Augusta, who have that creativity. Bubba is not someone I would play, but somebody like Bubba who has the ability to shape the ball both ways and thinks about a course strategically and creatively. Um, First of all, Bubba's in terrible form. Don't play him. Second of all, he hates blind shots, and there's like 10 different blind shots on this course where you can't actually see the target, and he hates that. But anyway, that type of player who can, kind of move that ball both directions, has a good short game, is probably long enough. And by the way, it doesn't mean that somebody like DeChambeau, a Kepka, Scheffler, who's also stupid long. Like, it doesn't mean those guys, they're the best players in the world, number one. And they're also very long, and they have great short games too. It just means for me that those other types of players are on a slightly more even playing field than they would normally be in a U.S. Open. Normally in a U.S. Open, all of those other guys, the DeChambeaus, the DJs, the Kepkas, Schefflers, Roms, like they would have a much bigger advantage than they're going to have this week. It's just shrunk. It's just shrunk a little bit. Yes, they are still favorites over those other guys, and they should be, but their advantage just isn't as big this week.
I think one that gives us more credibility to our balanced lineups that we like to build during major weeks. So love to hear that. But two, the Augusta point is something I heard when I was listening to other people talk about this or find course comparisons, right? There's no one course that fits as a comparable to this particular course. But Augusta came up multiple times because of it's not necessarily a first shot golf course. The approach is important. Angles to the green, around the green, the creativeness. So is that something that you are looking at? Is maybe course history at Augusta, since this course has never hosted a professional golf course in I don't know how many years, if not ever. So is Augusta a comp course for you this week?
Yeah, Augusta would be a comp course for sure. The Sedgefield Country Club, where they play the Wyndham, would also be a comp course for me. Similar slopey greens that slope back to front that require creativity, is pretty long. I think similar grasses at Sedgefield as well. The same designer did Riviera, so that one could also be. But if you listen to the players, they would tell you pretty different than Riv, even though it's like 15 minutes away from it. The topography and the grasses are different. And it's just not the same style, of course. So those two, a little bit less Riv, are probably my three course comps. By the way, that's part of the reason why the golf architecture fans love it, is because there's not a great course comp for it. Like, you have to basically piece together some of the stuff. You could even say, honestly, like a Royal Melbourne or some of those Australian sandbelt courses would be, because they almost always play firm and fast. They have a ton of steep bunkering around the greens, and their surround areas are combinations of like kind of tall fescue grass and like really closely mown areas. It's probably not actually that much like Royal Melbourne. To be clear, I've never played either one. I've never set foot on the grounds of either of those courses. Um, But like that could be possible as well. I think it's more for me less about the comp course and more just about like the type of player that can handle that type of area, that 30 yards and in around the green. I think is going to be real important this week.
Okay, I just needed you to say one thing about Australia so I can play 2% Cam Davis. So we have checked that
Hey,
box.
Cam's a. I like Cam. He's a solid. When we get to the less than 5% owned section, he's a player that should be in there for sure.
That is great to hear or bad to hear. I'm not sure yet. So, all right. So, for all you fans of golf courses, or for those of you who wanted more in depth information about the course so you can make your own selections, we've covered that. Let's talk about the weather, Nero. And again, not like a Northeast course. We probably won't see a ton of weather this week, but do you think it will have an impact, whether in how the course is played, or will there be any potential wave advantages?
Yeah, I think the so first of all the forecast is pretty benign. Southern California in June, like highs in the 70s, maybe getting to 80 at the most. At the end of the day, very little wind, like 5 to 7, 8 miles an hour. Maybe it gets to 10, gusts to 12 or something. But that's not much wind. No rain in the forecast, so the grounds crew will be able to make it as firm and fast as they want it to be. So to me, that's like the biggest thing about the weather. It is close enough to the coast that, from what I understand, there's a decent marine layer there in the mornings. So I would, even though the breeze is up a little bit in the afternoon, I think if I was playing showdown, I would generally prefer players in the afternoon because it'll be a little bit warmer. The ball will travel a little bit further, and I don't know that the ground will be that much softer. It might be a little softer in the morning because of the marine layer, but I think I'd rather have the increased temperature and the increased distance from the ball of the guys playing later in the afternoon. Again, I don't think it's big either way. So I play in showdown. Maybe I'm looking to grab four guys from the afternoon or something like that. It's nothing too big. And yeah, general wave advantages, I don't think there are any this week.
Okay, good. But that is a nice little interesting tidbit about the marine layer. So thank you, Nero, for that. Now let's analyze the betting markets. Again, for those who've been watching these videos every single week, you know that we look at multiple sharp sports books. We analyze a golfer's odds to win and how it's moved over the course of the week. And if a golfer's odds to win have improved at every single sharp sports book, we check it off. We call it a trifecta play, an overlap play, a sharp sports book play, whatever you want to call it. They've had excellent production so far this season. Denny McCarthy was on the list 2 weeks ago, should have won at the Memorial. And we've had many names like that on the list. Again, because we are recording this on Tuesday, very limited data so far. I imagine this list will expand and it will be pretty interesting by the time we hit Wednesday night. Nero, just one name so far. And for those of you who love chalk or those of you who hate chalk, this name will be interesting. It's Ricky Fowler, who is at just $7,500. His odds to win have improved at every sharp sportsbook, Nero. So, Ricky, as you and I joked about last year, when whoever was betting Ricky Fowler every single week and was going bankrupt, they might have been making their money back this year with some each way and some top 10 and top 20 bets. Because he's played a lot better, and he's on the list this week.
Yeah, I think he makes sense in that California boy who has. I was just looking at his recent finishes. He's missed one cut, so and that was at the PGA. Barely missed it.
Yep.
And then other than that, he's only finished outside the top 20 twice
Yeah.
this year.
Yeah.
And that goes all the way back to January, including his last two were ninth at the Memorial and sixth at the Charles Schwab. And then he misses the cut at the PGA 14th, 15th, 10th, 17th, 13th. Like, I mean, he's clearly in great form. He's playing so much better than he was playing last year. He's got local ties, to the area. It doesn't mean he has any experience at this course. Now, his record in California is pretty good. It's not like amazing, but it's pretty solid, and he's clearly comfortable in this area. Like he's a tough fade. Like normally we don't like to play chalk in the 7K range on a regular week, but that everyone needs to remember pricing in a regular week is very different because the players in the 7K range that get chalky are not nearly as good as the players in the 7K range at majors that get chalky. play way more 7K chalk in majors than I do in regular tour events.
And the big reason for that is we can find very similar reasoning. We can find lower owned golfers in the 8K and in the 9K range
Mm.
that are much better golfers than the low owned golfers in the 8K and the 9K range on a typical week. So just because we've done this every single major, Shane Lowry at sub 10% is a guy that fits the bill, right? A guy who has been decent lately and is sub 10%. We can find guys like that in the upper 8Ks and 9K range to balance that ownership levels in tournaments. So Nero, just Ricky is on the list so far. We got a couple more names that have been hit at a couple sharp sports books. I'm sure that list will expand. And for those of you watching and want the full list, make sure you join our Discord server, occupyfantasy.com/Discord. I will put the final overlap plays probably 8 or 9 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. So make sure you go check that out. And not much else to talk about from a betting market perspective, unless Nero, you have any other thoughts on what you've seen so far in the betting markets.
The only thing I'll note is that there was a decent sized move on Scheffler at Pinnacle, and we don't often see the market leader, or the shortest odds in the market, get even shorter. So I'll be very curious to see what happens to his odds between now and lock. And like Brian said, we'll post an update on Scheffler's odds tomorrow in the Discord. So be on the lookout for that. But that's always interesting to me when the market leader gets clipped at Pinnacle, because it doesn't happen very often.
And that is a scary thought for those of us willing to build balanced lineups. If Scheffler is
Yes.
getting hit at Sharp Sportsbooks, and God forbid he puts just average this
Like,
week.
yeah, if he just putts average, he might win by 6 if he keeps hitting the ball like he's been hitting it. So look out.
Tough. Okay. All right. Let's talk about some ownership now as we close out the show. And again, this is one of our first or second runs of ownership. It's going to get more precise over the next 24 to 36 hours. So again, make sure you check back in our Occupy model for updates. Nero, as of right now, we have a handful of guys 20% or higher. We don't expect anyone to be more than 30%. But speaking of 7K chalk, we have a few guys that topped the list so far. Justin Rose, Tommy Fleetwood, Ricky Fowler, Bryson DeChambeau. And then we have the guys at the top, Rory, Scotty Scheffler, Xander, Tyrrell Hatton, and even Adam Scott with the Australia ties is a 7K chalk golfer. So lots of 7K chalk this week, which is kind of surprising. You figured they would cannibalize each other, but that just means to me that the other 7K options are going to pretty much have zero ownership.
Yeah, they're not gonna have much, and I think it also would tell you that the very top end of the range might have a little bit more ownership than is currently being projected, because the easiest thing to do is grab Scheffler or Rahm or Kepka, whatever floats your boat, and then grab a bunch of those guys in that 7K range, and that I imagine will be a pretty popular build structure when everything's said and done.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if we look at the top, right, Scheffler 20%, Rahm 14%, Koepka we have projected for just 11%, Cantlay 10%. So, and then Victor Hovland rounds out the 10K range on DraftKings at 18%. So basically, just two of those guys are being high owned, and the field recognizes the balanced build here. But of the 10K golfers, who do you like the most? Who are you more willing to fade? And do you think this ownership is correct?
It's a good question. I think it really comes down to will Hovland, McIlroy, and Schauffele, price from 9,600 to 10K, and really Hovland and McIlroy at 10K and 9.9K, will they suck up the ownership from Rahm, Kepka, and Cantlay? I think that's really the question that you have to answer, because I assume that's why Kepka, Cantlay, and Hovland, or Rahm, Kepka, and Cantlay aren't projected at the moment for more than the 14, 11, and 10 that they're projected for in the model. If I had to, yeah, who do I like the best? I mean, it's hard not to like Scotty Scheffler, just because he's basically striking the ball at a historic rate, and he's putting like, I don't know, somebody who's not a great putter.
Like me.
And if he just, yeah, like me or you, if he would just putt, if he had just been putting like normal, like flat 0 strokes gained, he would have probably won 2 of his last 3 starts. And certainly the Memorial, he would have won going away by, 5, 6, 7 shots. So hard to stay away from him. I think if I, if you can have reasons to fade Hovland if you believe that like tight chipping and that kind of thing, not really fade him, but be under the field on him is going to be extra important because that's the weakest part of Hovland's game, even though it's improved. You could play a subjective thing with Rory and think that the live events plus contending at the Canadian Open and falling flat on Sunday is going to catch up with him. On top of the fact that it might not be the best, the best course fit for him that there is. And Cantlay, obviously, you could fade because he doesn't have his major pedigree is pretty terrible, honestly. Even though he's got a great local connection, and he's generally been playing pretty good this year. Scheffler, Rahm, and Koepka are harder to fade, and I think you probably need to be under the field on at least one of those three. Um, I don't know. I mean, my instinctual answer is Kepka, but like I've done that the last
Yeah.
couple of majors, and it just gotten annihilated for thinking that way. So I don't know. Maybe I just would have to match the field on two of them and get over the field on one of them.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Cantlay's the interesting one, right? One of the lowest owned of the group, and he actually tops the model this week. The model doesn't take it.
I assume that's because he's pseudo overpriced for his odds.
Yeah.
Especially when you compare him to like Hovland, McIlroy, Schauffele. And the model recognizes that like, yeah, they're not that different as players, and the model doesn't really know that he's struggled at majors, and that's the narrative. So it's just like, oh, you get Cantlay 10% ownership. Yeah, should love that for tournaments.
Right. Exactly. All right. So speaking of lower ownership, we'll finish the show here. If you guys have liked what you've seen so far, make sure you give us a thumbs up. We appreciate that. It lets us know to continue to do these videos. I think we got 70, 80 likes last week, so if we can surpass that, that'd be great for everyone involved. And again, if you want to get notified when we go live or upload these PGA DFS videos, make sure you are subscribed here on YouTube. It's free to do. Just click subscribe below this video, and you'll get a notification whenever we post a PGA DFS video. So, Nero, let's talk about some guys for, let's say 6% or less. Give us some buffer as the ownership gets more precise over the next couple of days. So if we filter the model to 7% or less, the first one that sticks out to me is Justin Thomas at 7%. Just very interesting based on his long-term ceiling. But any other guys stick out to you this early as you're writing the plug as we finish this show? Any guys stick out to you that's 7% or less that you think the field is missing out on?
Yeah, JT obviously is just a total mismatch with his career ceiling and his price and who he is as a golfer. But if you factor in recent form at all, like maybe this is the worst recent form he's ever been in. Like he's just he doesn't seem like himself. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. But usually, when someone doesn't seem like themselves, like they make a pretty compelling tournament play
Yep,
because what do we know about what's going on with him?
exactly.
Uh, Thigala is certainly interesting to me. I think Ryan Fox would make a good fit. He's long, he's got decent touch. He's from New Zealand, so like this should be a somewhat familiar looking course to him.
Really quickly,
Minwoo,
he
yeah,
was on the overlap list about an hour ago and just fell off. One of his odds drifted at one of the books, so wouldn't be
yeah.
surprised to see him back on the list. So good call out there.
Yeah, but especially looking at his price, he's one of those forgotten 7K guys
Yep,
because the other 7K guys are soaking up the rest of the ownership.
correct.
Um, Tom Kim, I think, is interesting, especially if you believe some Sedgefield link since he won there last year. This fits his game better than a bomb and gouge course because he's not a bomber. Eric Cole has been playing out of his mind
Yeah.
lately. An iron and short game type of player. Same with Andrew Putnam right below him. Munoz is interesting just because his price is so low, and if he was been playing on the PGA Tour for the last 6 months, I'll bet you he'd be 7,700 and not
Yep.
6,700. Cam Davis, obviously we talked about. Justin Suh, I think is a good play. West Coast kid, went to school at USC, got local ties. Also not a bomber and more of an iron short game player. So this should be a better fit for him than your regular U.S. Open. I wouldn't even mind Padraig Harrington down there. I think he's interesting as well. He's been playing pretty good. He's long enough now, and he's definitely got the experience in the short game chops to handle this type of course. I see people playing Gordon Sargent.
We saw how
He's
that went at
the
Augusta.
Yeah, I mean, he's just stupid long, and he's got lots of talent. But honestly, if I was going to play one of those guys, I'd rather play Sam Bennett, who, also like the college amateur. And even though Bennett's a couple $100 more expensive, Bennett was all over the Masters, and I'm just grabbing his recent. He's been playing in a couple tour events. Yeah, so he was 20th at the Canadian Open, 63rd at the Memorial, and 16th at the Masters. Missed no cuts, So clearly he can play at this level. And he was only 63rd at the Memorial because he shot 84 on Sunday.
Shit. Yeah.
So, but like if I'm gonna play a college kid with a lot of talent, I'd rather play Bennett, who's proven that he can hang in PGA Tour events, versus playing Sargent, who has who looks great and hits 270-yard 3 irons, but hasn't confirmed to me yet that he can handle the pressure of a tour event. Because really, at that range, all you're looking for is that person to make the cut,
Yes.
and I would have more faith in Bennett making the cut than someone like Sargent.
Fair enough. I mean, that's a great list of names. And I'll throw out two more that I just want to get your opinion on because they rank so highly in the motto. One is Kurt Kitayama, who was ranked highly in the motto most of the season, got the win at Bay Hill, obviously. Obviously, the concerns are spraying it off the tee. Not great for this particular course. And if we are comparing it to Augusta, he ranked highly in the model there as a low owned play, missed a cut and wasn't even close. Kitayama, does this course feel as bad of a fit as I think it does? Because clearly the model sees something.
I think it's. I don't think the model factors in. Well, maybe it does a little bit, but what Kitayama does best for majors is he likes hard golf courses, and he tends to play well when the score is closer. The winning score is closer to par than when the winning score is like 25 under or something like that. Yeah, I get a little concerned because he does tend to miss. He does tend to have 20 or 30-yard misses off the tee occasionally, and those here will get punished more than like the 5-yard miss off the fairway. But it's still a U.S. Open. It's still going to play very tough. It's not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination. So, and he's obviously stupid long. So you can have worse plays than him, even though I don't think even though he's not the best course fit. It is a guy who, with a proven history of when tough venues roll around, he's there more often than you would think his price and ownership combo would tell you he should be.
Agree, 6,800 and just 1%. And the final guy is a Euro Tour guy, Jordan Smith, who I admittedly do not know much about. The model is picking up on something from his Euro Tour stats this year. Do you know much about Jordan Smith? And if so, is there anything you can tell me about him?
I know more about Jordan Smith than I should know.
Okay, that's
If
great
I
for
had a
us.
if I had a well-rounded life, I'll tell you that much. He's pretty long. He's close to stupid long. Not quite, but he definitely he hits it probably like 310 or something off the tee. He's been. I think my biggest thing with him is like a lot of those Euro Tour players, like he's just inconsistent. Like you look at his results, his last 6 starts, yeah, on the DP World Tour, one of which was the PGA where he missed the cut again barely, but he missed it. So sixth, miscut, 16th, 32nd, sixth, and that's pretty emblematic of who he is. But for the ownership that you're going to get, you could have worse than him. But he would definitely be someone like you could maybe talk me into like 10% or something, 8% Kitayama. Like you could maybe talk me into like 3% Jordan Smith. Like I wouldn't. Kitayama's just a more trustworthy player at this level, on this type of course in this type of environment than Jordan Smith is, or at least than Jordan Smith has proven to be so far.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, that's all the insight that I need. So I appreciate that, Nero. So we'll close out the show here. Lots of great thoughts from our expert PGA writer. You can get his final thoughts in the daily plug at occupyfantasy.com. That will be posted Tuesday evening, roughly, with all of his top player picks, who's he using in his player pool, lineup construction tips, general strategies for majors, some betting market analysis. Everything you need for the slate will be in the PGA Daily Plug. That link is in the description below, so make sure you check it out after you watch this video. Niro, the floor is yours. Any final thoughts? Anything we didn't cover about the U.S. Open?
I think we covered. I think we covered most of it. My biggest takeaway. And by the way, I could easily end up being wrong about this, and it will be detrimental to my bankroll. But I am not going to play it like a traditional U.S. Open. I will definitely have more exposure to shorter players than I would at a normal U.S. Open. Like, just when I look at it from a macro perspective, that's what my breakdown says should be the case, and that's the way I'm going to play it. To be clear, I don't think everyone is going to play it that way. I've seen a lot of steam for like Bryson DeChambeau, and I see his ownership creeping up towards 20%. And I will have some Bryson. He's long and he plays good at tough venues and that kind of thing. But like, I'd much rather play Bryson at one of those U.S. Opens in the Northeast that's got 6-inch rough, 2 steps off the fairway where his swing speed makes a giant difference, than play him here, because I just don't think his advantage on this type of course is as big as it is on those other courses. He's obviously still Bryson DeChambeau. He's still very good at golf, and he could, you know, back his way into a top 10 or even higher finish. But I just don't. It's this week is about saying, am I willing to take the risk that the delta between the distance guys is not as big as it usually is for this type of golf tournament? And that's what I'm saying is the case.
And if you're right, that would provide a pretty big edge when it comes to ownership and potential GPP wins. So I think it's wise for all of us to at least consider that fact when building our
Yep.
lineups. So that'll do it for this show. You can talk with Niromada in our Discord server, occupyfantasy.com/Discord. That link, once again, is in the description below. Last minute updates, betting market analysis will be posted in there Wednesday evening. So make sure you check that out. You can ask me and Nero questions as well. And occupyfantasy.com is where you can get all of the information, the Occupy model, which you saw on screen, the daily plug, as well as our lineup builder, which allows you to build up to 300 lineups, FanDuel and DraftKings. So for Nero, I'm Brian. We appreciate you listening as always, and good luck with your lineups at the U.S. Open.